not seen the valley in 8 years. It looked the same, smaller, the way places do when you have been gone long enough to stop believing they were real. My brother's grave was on the hill above the house, next to our mother's. The preacher was a young man I did not know. He read from Ecclesiastes and got one of the verses wrong, and I stood at the back where no one had to look at me and did not correct him. There were 11 people on that hill. I counted them the way I count fence posts or teeth on a colt, because counting is what my hands do when the rest of me is gone quiet. Ruth was at the front. She wore black without any lace on it, and her hair was pinned tight against the wind, and she held Hattie's hand and did not once turn her head toward where I was standing. She did not need to. She knew I was there the way you know where a draft is coming from in a closed room. After, people went down to the house for the food that neighbors bring when someone dies. Ham and bread and 3 kinds of pie that no one wants but everyone eats because eating is easier than talking. I started toward my horse.
You were not invited.
She said it without turning around. I stopped walking. I know.
And what are you doing on my hill?
Your girl wrote me. Ruth turned around then. Her face did something I had never seen it do before, which was go completely blank. She had not known about the letter. I watched her work that out in the space of about 2 seconds, and in those 2 seconds, I saw her decide several things about her daughter that she would take up later and in private.
Hattie is 9 years old.
She spelled everything right. Ruth looked at me for a long time. Then she looked at the valley below us, where the ranch sat in its brown November quiet, with the cattle bunched against the fence, and the woodpile half of what it should have been, and the barn door hanging crooked on its top hinge.
The road out is the same one you came in on.
She went down the hill. I watched her go. Then I got on my horse and rode to Emmett Coyle's place 3 miles north, because I needed somewhere to sleep that was not my dead brother's house, and not the open ground in November. The first storm came 11 days after the funeral. It dropped the temperature to 14 below and killed 6 of Ruth's cattle before it was done. I knew because Emmett told me. Emmett Coyle was the kind of neighbor who knew everything that happened in the valley, and most of what did not. And he told it all in the same flat voice he used for the weather, which was the only voice he had. Lost 6 head down in the creek bottom. Gate still hanging wrong from the wind. She's out there with the girl and nobody else. And the woodpile won't see January. He said it over coffee at his kitchen table. He did not tell me to do anything. Emmett never told anyone to do anything. He just described the situation and let the silence work. I rode down to the ranch the next morning at first light. The thermometer on the barn post read 9 below. I got down from my horse and started splitting wood without knocking on the door. Ruth came out onto the porch after about 20 minutes. She stood there with her gray shawl pulled tight and watched me stack 4 rows of split oak against the barn wall without saying a word. I could feel her looking at me the way you can feel weather coming, and I kept my head down and my axe moving.
I did not ask for help.
I know.
I do not want you here.
I know that too. She went inside. I kept splitting. After another hour, the door opened again, and Hattie came out with a cup of coffee that had too much sugar in it and not enough heat left to drink. She set it on the fence post and ran back inside before I could say anything to her. That was how it started. Not with a conversation or an agreement or anything that looked like a decision anybody made. I just kept showing up. I fixed the barn gate on the second day and rehung the door on its track so it closed against the wind. On the third day, I broke ice at the creek and drove the remaining cattle up to the sheltered side of the ridge. On the fourth day, I found the harness room and spent 3 hours mending tack that had gone to ruin because there had been no one to mend it. Ruth did not speak to me for the first 6 days. She worked her end of the barn and I worked mine, and we moved around each other the way two people move in a space too small for what is between them, which is carefully and without looking up. On the 6th day, the temperature hit 14 below again, and Hattie asked me a question at supper. I had taken to eating standing at the counter near the door, because sitting at the table felt like sitting in my brother's chair, which is exactly what it was.
Did you know my papa?
Ruth's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. I did. He was my brother.
Mama said you went away before I was born.
That is right.
Why?
The kitchen was very quiet. The stove ticked. Ruth set her fork down and looked at her plate and waited for what I would say. And I understood that whatever I said next would be heard by a woman who already knew the answer and a child who did not. And there was no sentence in the language that could serve both of them. I had work to do in other places.
What kind of work?
Horses. I break horses.
Is that why your nose is like that?
I touched the scar across the bridge of my nose. A 3-year-old mare in Cheyenne had put it there with her left front hoof on a Tuesday morning in April. It is.
Does it hurt?
Not anymore. Ruth stood and cleared the plates. She did not look at me. I finished my coffee standing up and went back to the barn. Emmett came by every few days. He brought salt and news and his opinions about the weather, which were always the same opinion, which was that it was going to get worse before it got better. Saw your horse in the Greer barn 5 mornings running now. I am fixing the tack. Must be a considerable amount of tack. The old man held his pipe in his teeth and looked at the mountains. He never lit the pipe. I do not know if he owned tobacco. He just held the stem between his teeth and talked around it. Your brother was a good man, Caleb. But he was not a rancher. That place needed 2 hands on it from the day he took it over, and it never got them. I did not answer. There was nothing I could say to that which was not the thing I could not say. On the 7th day, a pipe froze in the kitchen wall, and I heard her hitting it with a wrench from the barn. I came in through the side door without knocking. She was standing on a chair with her sleeves pushed past her elbows, working a copper fitting with a wrench too big for the job. There was ice on the floor from where it had burst in the night, and the firebox damper was stuck, and the stove had gone cold, and the kitchen was the same temperature as the barn. I looked up at her. Her forearms were bare and red from the cold, and she had flour on one wrist from the morning's bread, and there was a tendon standing in the back of her hand where she gripped the wrench, and I saw the line at the base of her throat, where the black fabric of her collar sat a 1/4 inch lower than it should have, and the skin there was pale in a way the rest of her was not. You need a smaller wrench and a lit stove.
I know what I need.
She looked down at me and I looked up at her. Her jaw was set. Her forearms were bare. And I thought about the 8 years I had spent not standing in this kitchen, and how none of them had made me someone who could stand in this kitchen and not notice the things I was noticing. I fixed the damper. She fixed the pipe. Neither of us said another word about it. She rolled her sleeves down, and I went back to the barn and stood in the cold for a while, doing nothing useful until my hands remembered how to work. The first calf came on January 9th at 2 in the morning. It came wrong. Breech, with the legs folded under instead of leading, and the cow was down and blowing hard, and there was nothing to do but go in after it. I was in the barn. Ruth heard the cow from the house and came out in her coat over her nightdress, with her hair still pinned, and she took one look at the situation and rolled her sleeves up past her elbows without a word. Her forearms were pale and spotted with flour from baking, because Ruth baked when she could not sleep, and she could not sleep most nights. And I learned this not because she told me, but because I could smell the bread from the barn loft every night at midnight. We worked together for an hour. I will not describe what that work looks like to anyone who does not already know it, except to say that it is the kind of labor where you stop thinking about everything except the animal and the living thing inside it that is trying to come into the world the wrong way around. At some point during that hour, I looked up, and Ruth was looking at me, not at the cow, and not at the work, at me. A strand had pulled free from its pins on one side, and there was blood on her arms past the elbow, and she was breathing hard, and I could see the place at the base of her throat where her pulse was moving. The calf came. It was alive. It lay in the straw, making the sounds that new things make when they have not yet worked out the business of breathing. And I sat back on my heels, and Ruth sat back on hers, and we were 2 feet apart in my dead brother's barn, covered in the same blood, and neither of us moved.
Mama, is the calf born?
Hattie was in the doorway with the coffee pot in both hands, and her braids coming undone, and her boots on with no stockings inside them.
It is born. Go back to bed. Can I name it? You can name it in the morning. Is Uncle Caleb staying?
Ruth looked at me across the straw. The calf was between us, trying to stand on legs it did not yet trust, and the lantern was swinging in the draft from the door. And the question Hattie had asked was not the question Hattie had asked.
He is staying through the calving. Go to bed.
Hattie went back to the house. The door banged behind her. Ruth and I sat in the straw with the calf between us, and the pink coming into the sky through the barn door, and we did not speak for a long time. Sometimes silence is what 2 people say when they have too much to say, and no safe place to put any of it.
She writes you.
1 letter. She wrote me 1 letter.
What did it say?
The letter was in my coat pocket, where it had lived since it arrived at a relay station in Cheyenne 6 weeks before the funeral. I had read it so many times the folds were going white. She said the fence was broken. She said the cattle were getting out. She said you cried when they did. Ruth's throat moved. She swallowed once, hard, the way a person does when they're keeping something down that wants to come up. And I watched the line of her throat move in the lamplight. And then I looked at the calf, because looking at the calf was easier.
She should not have written that.
The fence was broken, though.
That is not the part I mean.
February was the worst month. The temperature sat at 14 below for 9 days running and did not come up, as though the cold had found a number it was satisfied with and intended to hold it against us until something broke. We lost 2 more head. I dragged them to the fence line and did not tell Hattie. The work made a rhythm. I was in the barn by 5. Ruth was in the kitchen by 5:30. Hattie was at the table with her school book by 6. I ate breakfast standing at the counter because sitting at the table was sitting in Wes's chair. And every morning Ruth set a plate at the counter without comment. And every morning I ate it standing up. And neither of us discussed why. We did not talk about Wes. We did not talk about the 8 years. We talked about the fence and the feed and the temperature and how many calves were due and when, and it was enough to fill the days without ever touching what was underneath them. But I watched her. I will not pretend otherwise. I watched the back of her neck when she stood at the counter rolling dough, and her collar sat low, and the skin there was pale and fine in a way that made me turn back to whatever I was holding and grip it harder. I watched her forearms when she plunged them into the wash tub and wrung the sheets with a twist that started in her hips and ended in her fists. I watched the hollow at the base of her throat when she drank water from the tin cup at the pump, and her throat moved once, twice, and she wiped her mouth with the back of her wrist. I had been watching this woman for 20 years. 8 of those years were spent at a distance that was supposed to cure it. It had not cured it. One night in late February, she found the letter. Hattie's letter. I had left my coat on the hook by the kitchen door, and Ruth had gone through the pockets looking for a match for the stove. And what she found instead was a piece of paper, folded into quarters, with her daughter's handwriting on it. I came in from the barn, and she was sitting at the table with the letter open in front of her. She was not crying. Ruth did not cry where anyone could see it. I knew she cried because Hattie had told me so in a letter written by a 9-year-old who had no idea what she was putting into motion.
She says, "Come fix the fence." She says, "Mama cries when the cattle get out." She says, "Papa is gone now, and the man at the store says we will lose the place by spring."
Ruth folded the letter along its soft white creases and set it on the table between us.
Did you come because of what she wrote? Or did you come because it gave you a reason to come back?
That was the hardest question I have ever been asked, because the answer was both, and both was not something I could say to a woman whose husband was 6 weeks in the ground, whose husband was my brother, whose husband had married her the spring I left the valley, without telling anyone the reason, which everyone in the valley knew anyway. I came because she asked me to.
That is not an answer.
It is the only one I have that is true. Ruth stood and went to her bedroom and closed the door. I sat at the table with the letter and my cold coffee and did not move for a long time. March came in hard and went out gentle, the way it does in that part of the country when the mountains decide they are finished with winter. The temperature swung from 14 below to 42 in the space of a week, and the creek flooded, and the mud was deep in the yard, and 2 calves were born the same night, both healthy, both standing within the hour. By the end of March, we had 17 new calves. Ruth had gone into the winter with 41 head, and come out of it with 53, which was not wealth, but was the distance between keeping the place and losing it. On the 1st of April, I started putting my things together in the barn loft. There was not much. A bedroll, a bridle, a change of clothes, and a letter I had read so many times I could have said it from memory. I had come with less and expected to leave with about the same.
You are packing.
The calving is done.
You said you would stay through the calving. You did not say you would leave after it.
She was right about that. I had been careful with my words, and she had been careful with hers, and we had both heard what we needed to hear, which is what people do when the truth is the wrong shape for the space they are trying to fit it into. Your mama and I had an agreement.
Mama has agreements about everything. They are mostly wrong.
She kicked the barn door with her boot and walked back to the house. I stood there with the saddle over my arm and the understanding that I was making the same mistake I had made 8 years ago. And it felt the same way it had felt then, which was like a weight sitting low in the chest that does not shift when you breathe. I found Ruth in the kitchen. She was standing at the window with her arms folded, watching Hattie throw rocks at the fence post in the yard. She did not turn around when I came in. The north fence is whole. The barn gate tracks true. The tack is mended, and the woodpile will see summer. Emmett said he would check in on you.
Emmett is 70 years old.
He is 63.
He is 70 in the ways that matter, Caleb. He cannot pull a calf or split a cord or break ice when it is 14 below and the creek is the only water the stock has.
I set my hat on the table. It was the only thing I owned that had ever been on that table. And I put it there the way you set down something you mean to come back for. And I did not know if I meant it that way until I saw my own hand let go of it. Ruth. She turned around. Her eyes were dry, and her jaw was set, and her arms were still crossed. And she was the same woman I had walked away from 8 years ago. And she was someone I had never met. And both of those things were true in the same face at the same time.
You should go before Hattie gets used to you. She is 9. She does not understand that people leave.
She understands it better than you think. She wrote a letter about it.
She wrote a letter because she is 9, and she believed it would work. It should not have worked.
But it did.
You left. You did not write. You did not come for the wedding or the christening or the 2 Christmases Wes asked you to ride down for. You were not here when the well went dry, or when the wind took the roof, or when your brother sat at this table and said your name like it was something that hurt him to carry. And now you are here because a 9-year-old asked, and you want me to...
She did not finish it. Her voice, which had been steady and level, and as controlled as a fenced road for the entire winter, broke on the word want. It did not break loudly. It broke the way a wire breaks when you have been tightening it for months, and it finally cannot hold the shape you have forced on it. She pressed her lips together and looked at the window and said nothing. I did not move. Every true thing she had said was true, and I had no defense against any of it. I had left because I could not watch my brother marry the woman I had been walking around for 3 years, trying to find words for. And that reason had been enough to get me out of the valley, and not enough to keep me whole on the other side of it. I did not come for the wedding because I could not stand in a church and watch it happen. I did not come for the christening because I would have had to hold her and act as though that did not cost me anything. I did not write because every sentence I started was the truth, and the truth was not something I could put in a letter to my brother's wife. I left once. It took from me every person I had. Ruth's arms came down. Her hands were shaking. and I do not think she knew it because she pressed them flat against the counter behind her and held them there the way you hold something down that is trying to get away from you.
And what if you leave again?
She said it flat, without the rise at the end that would have made it a question. I will not.
You cannot know that.
I am not guessing. I am telling you what I know. I know that I spent 8 years in the circuit breaking other people's horses and sleeping in other people's barns and calling it a life when it was not a life. I know your daughter wrote me a 4-line letter, and I rode 400 miles in November because she asked. And I know that I have been in love with you since I was 19 years old, and leaving did not fix it, and I am done pretending it did. That was the first time I said it. I was 34 years old. It had taken me 15 years to get the word out of my chest and into the air. And when it came, it was plain and flat and ordinary, the way the biggest things always are. Ruth did not say anything for a long time. She looked at me, and then she looked at the table where my hat was sitting, and then she looked at the window where Hattie had stopped throwing rocks and was watching the house with the focus of a child who knows that something is being decided inside it.
The back bedroom has not been used since November. The sheets are clean.
I understood what she was saying and what she was not saying, and the distance between those two things was the exact shape of everything we would have to work out, and it would take longer than a calving season to do it. I will sleep in the barn.
You have slept in the barn since November. It is April.
I know what month it is, Ruth.
Then come inside.
She left the kitchen door open, all the way open, and she walked past me without touching me and went to Hattie in the yard. And I stood in the kitchen with my hat on the table, and the door opened behind me, and the spring air coming in. That night I slept in the back bedroom for the first time. The sheets were clean, the way she said they would be. The room smelled like cedar and dust and the soap Ruth used on the linens. Through the wall I could hear Hattie turn over in her bed, and farther away the sound of Ruth in the kitchen, not baking, just sitting. I lay in the dark and listened to the house hold all three of us, and I did not sleep well, and I did not care. It was not easy after that. I will not pretend it was. The valley had its opinions. Emmett's opinion was that it was about time, and he shared that view with the entire mercantile. The man who ran the store had a different opinion, which he shared with Ruth on a Monday. And Ruth shared her thoughts about his opinion in a voice that carried to the street. And we did not go back to that store. But the cattle were fed, and the fences were whole, and the calves were growing, and Hattie was doing long division at the kitchen table in the evenings, and the temperature was 58 degrees and climbing. I had left this valley at 26 with nothing but a horse and a reason I could not say out loud. I came back at 34 because a 9-year-old girl who spelled everything right sat down at this table and wrote, "Come fix the fence. Mama cries when the cattle get out." I fixed the fence. The door is still open. I am still here.